Morning, everybody. I think I'll go without a mic if everybody feels they can hear me. I think it's a pretty small room. It's easier for me to then read bios and things. First of all, I would like to thank the World Affairs Council and Terry McCarthy in particular for the inspiration for the panel. The focus of this panel was really inspired by an experience that Terry had where he was at a lunch meeting with somebody who was probably late 40s, maybe early 50s, Korean national, and a much younger woman from China. And the topic of conversation had veered off to the discussion of the Japanese comfort women, invasion of Nanjing, something that would typically obviously create robust conversation or even divisive conversation, or perhaps even something that would lead to animosity. And Terry noticed that the young woman from China was actually had her head in the iPhone.
Sorry, unfortunately, if you could use the mic, that would be helpful.
Okay, I'll use it. So I'll go to the mic. And so Terry McCarthy's experience while he was talking to someone of a slightly older generation about comfort women, Japanese invasion of Nanjing, and noticed that a much younger Chinese woman at the table was kind of ignoring the conversation, uninterested, with her head in the iPhone. And then shortly after that, when the conversation went to another topic, which was K-pop, and started discussing Japanese singers, Taiwanese pop stars, or film, all of a sudden that young woman's head perked up. She was out of the iPhone and avidly talking about all these other subject matters that were clearly more of greater interest to her and near and dear to her heart. And it led to a conversation between Terry and I about modern culture, pop culture, the things that interest the millennials as something that actually transcends borders, transcends historical divisions, traditional geographic boundaries, political divisions. And so that's what this fantastic group here is about to talk about. Through their eyes, through their experience. We also have a great late-breaking addition in Angela from CJ. We won't talk about what delayed Angela, but Angela is the Chief Marketing Officer of CJ E&M America. She previously served there as the Senior Vice President of Marketing, and her experience includes working at the Center for Asian Pacific Leadership at USC, also as an Associate Director, and she received her BA in Chinese history from Columbia University. And immediately to her left, Christina Chow. And as long as we're getting into academic backgrounds, she has her BA in economics and political science from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and master's in international comparative political and economic systems from Georgetown University, which makes her also near and dear to my heart because that's my alumni, at least undergrad. She previously worked as a senior project manager with Plan C Group, and that was an Asian talent management and digital media firm, and now currently an agent at CAA, working with a variety of clients, including major studios, film financiers, technology companies, as well as traditional brands. Her department is the corporate development department at CAA. Immediately to Christina's left, Manjit Singh. He received his MBA from UCLA's Anderson Graduate School of Business and a BA in economics from St. Stephen's College in Delhi. He has a postgraduate diploma in management from the Indian Institute of Management, I'm really going to mispronounce this, Ahmedabad, India. Close. Manjit began his career at Nestle in India. Previously worked in general management consulting at Simpson & Co., the Cass Group AG, and Cresap. Manjit is currently president of Sony Pictures Home Entertainment and previously chief executive officer of Sony Pictures Television Networks in India. Under Manjit, Sony Pictures Indian networks grew into some of the most profitable and highest rated channels in the market. And last but not least, Yuki Kito from Japan, who started her career at JVC Entertainment in LA, later joined the entertainment farm in Tokyo. The farm partnered with Fox Searchlight and India's UTV in 2006 to finance Meera Nair's The Namesake, which she co-produced. She went on to produce Wayne Wang's 1,000 Years of Good Prayers, which won the Golden Cell at San Sebastian in 2007. She also produced Kiyoshi Kurosawa's Tokyo Sonata in the 2008 Cannes International Film Festival, which also won the jury prize that year in A Certain Regard. Yuki also recently produced Mifui, The Last Samurai, a documentary about Japan's legendary actor, and directed by Stephen Okazaki, premiering at the 2015 Venice Film Festival recently, and now most recently reteaming with Wayne Wang for While the Women Are Sleeping, starring Beat Kitano, and premiering in this year's Berlin Film Festival. So we have a very diverse group, diverse experience, and maybe I'd like to just kick it off, and we can go in any order, whether any of you have had similar experiences to the one that I related that Terry had, where you're experiencing something, where you're seeing modern or pop culture really transcending these borders, unifying diverse regions or countries in the group. Is it purely something that's generational, or has it been going on? Maybe we just haven't noticed it as much and notice it more in this age of social media and the internet.
I'll take a crack at that. So my caveat to this group was we're talking about Asian culture in Asia, but actually I deal mostly with the spread of K-pop, K-dramas here in the United States. So my experience is here. Our company has a giant event, so we get to really see who these people are. It's called KCON, and just by walking around and talking to people gives you a lot of insight about how they came to be. We had, between New York and LA this year, we had over 110,000 people, and maybe less than half of those are Asian American, or Asian per se, and then everybody else is there. So I've met a family last year, actually, this is an amazing story. I met a family from Brazil who had driven to Los Angeles to come to KCON. This year I met in LA two young African American women who were from Florida and said that they had loved KCON in New York. One of her friends couldn't make it, but then they had both made sure to come out to Los Angeles to be here for KCON. And they always, and the African American women, this is their third year coming to KCON, so they kind of make it an annual pilgrimage, which is kind of the idea behind KCON. But they said that they love the community when they get here. So I think you had mentioned the importance of social media. So social media is, I believe, absolutely the driver of all of this, and allows what you would consider non-mainstream culture to become much more distributed. And they create these incredible friendships and communities online, and then they meet each other in person, and then that kind of just becomes a reinforcing cycle. So yeah, not just political sensitivities, but cultural differences where I think everybody always is very curious. Why would these young African-American women or Hispanic or just not even Asian people be so interested in K-pop and Korean drama? And they don't have a political bent to it. They just say, oh, it's just so much fun. It's a fun thing. I really love it. But I have a slightly different, I think it's a form of an alternative culture. When mainstream culture becomes very cynical and heavy, then almost a form of rebellion and alternative culture, I think, is this idea of innocence and fun and romance. And there's something about, to be very academic about it, I think there's an aspect of a female gaze. Like, we always talk about male gaze in Hollywood-style entertainment and the objectification of women. You will notice that most of the fans of K-pop and K-drama are women. And it's the reverse. It's the absolute idealization of just objectification of men, like these perfect men.
We could talk about the phenomenon of my love from another star.
Yeah, wonderful romance, fun, fantasy. So it's an alternative form of entertainment that's become viable through social media.
Sure, absolutely.
And I think piggybacking off of that, it's interesting. So I work a lot with Chinese tech platforms, which are therefore, the Alibabas, the Baidus, the Tencents of the world, who have made a considerable presence here in Hollywood. But it's interesting, whenever I go into a room and there's a little bit of downtime, if you just bring up Descendants of the Sun or My Love from Another Star, it's without fail something that people will want to talk about. And I'm glad you brought up the objectification of men, because I feel like it does highlight maybe some of the social fears that some women in China are going through right now, of who will I marry? Will they be rich enough? Will they be settled enough? Will they love me? And all things that are not maybe just regionalized to China, but I think is something that any person might, whether male or female or in China or not, will think about. But again, I think Korea's really hit it upon the head and said, not only will there be someone to love you, but there will be two people to love you.
And they will be wealthy, and they will have they'll have superpowers as well. Yes.
That's very good. I think some of the observations that I see in India, but also, frankly, anywhere in the world, is millennials are people who are living in the moment. So, they really don't care about the history. They care about what's relevant to them and what they're thinking about. In fact, in many ways, that's what's defining Hollywood today. You have a hit if you're part of the mainstream and part of what's socially relevant at the time, and you have a complete flop if you aren't. So it's very divided. In a country like India, we're most influenced by the South Asian neighbors that we have. And you will get, kids will immediately pick up their heads and join a conversation if you're talking about the Pakistan cricket team. Not so much if you're talking about partition. I mean, they don't care. It happened a long time ago, it's done. They really are looking for what's relevant to them now. And so I would say that in that sense, their concerns and the level of goodwill that exists at that level of athletes and things like that is very different from what exists between the governments.
I was told in Japan on a major news site, 30% is entertainment news. Who's breaking up with who, or what idol band is splitting, along with all the political news and the world affairs. And I think that was written in New York Times that Japan is, the major attention goes to entertainment rather than, more difficult, serious issues, which I think in a way some people just say it's a great time for the government because people's attention goes to idol bands. They can do anything they want without worrying about what public thinks. I don't know if it's that, that far. But I think it's interesting that big news can spread over Asia, and actually, in a very entertainment world, it kind of brings up the subject matters or topics to communicate, and in a way, we can kind of not talk about political tension with the neighboring countries in Asia, but focus on relatively friendly subject matter. That I think, it helps.
Stephen, if I could actually share an anecdote, I think going back to what Manjeet was saying, my first time, my mother grew up in Taiwan, and so I have gone to Taiwan my entire life. And when I was little, I thought Taiwan was, at the end of the day, was a different country. So my first time in mainland China, when I was 12, I was meeting some relatives, and they had asked me in Chinese, like, where else have you gone in Asia? And I said, Taiwan. And it was sort of like as if I was saying, oh, I've gone to Colorado. If someone asking me in New York, where else have you gone in this region? And they're like, no, where else have you gone in Asia? And I was like, Taiwan. And they're like, no, that's the same country. And that was my first introduction to the whole tension there. But what was interesting is that there's a population of the youth that hasn't struck them as an issue to be talked about. And I think growing up as a millennial, sort of in the older skewed, I do have friends in mainland China that have said to me and voiced to me, it's not so much apathy, it's sort of a feeling that it may not matter what they think or where they're standing. that before, especially the millennials that have grown up post-'80s, because there's very different trends and habits with the post-'90s millennials. But the post-'80 millennials have really thought, it may not matter. I may have my own thought, and I may want to have a micro-rebellion in what I watch and what I buy and what I wear, but in terms of the central government, I may not necessarily have the power at this point to make a difference.
I think that makes a lot of sense. In terms of these trends, have any of you noticed a pattern, and does that pattern change depending on the genre of entertainment we're talking about? In other words, it could be sports, it could be music, it could be cuisine, it could be anything within the entertainment fields. Do you see that perhaps the trends originate perhaps in Taiwan for the pop singers and then it travels from there, or with the Korean dramas? So for each of you, what do you see as the origins of the trends as they may travel through the region?
That's a good question. There is a division between music and TV and film. I will definitely say that. So the TV and the film, I mean, our audience here in the United States is much more Korean American. So anything that's doing well in Korea determines what's doing well here, no matter the critical notices, doesn't matter. It's just how well is it doing in Korea. Drama, I think, driven by similar, the popularity in its home country kind of makes everybody perk up and go, oh, what's the latest? I'm going to pay attention to that. Music has been a little bit different, and we've seen different groups pop, K-pop, pop, globally outside of Korea before sometimes they make it in Korea. And that's an interesting phenomena because there's obviously the overarching popularity that matters, and it makes people note who's hot and who's not. But I guess I would assume, this is my, I have a lot of theories about this because I work in it. My theory is that in music in Korea is much more still like, the traditional music industry here. The labels or the companies decide who they're going to break and when they're going to do it, and they have the good deals with the networks and have more prominence on air. So, just the vast majority of attention is made to go to the major stars. That said, the American audience that I've seen is really interested not so much in the complete package. They love the package, but they always also gravitate towards people who they think are really good. So, I would say that one of the biggest, hottest groups right now is a group called BTS, Bangtan Sonyeondan. And they didn't do much in Korea, but we got them here at KCON, and people fell in love with them. And then just, their fan club, all the fan clubs have names. They're called the Army, and they're just amazingly proactive. And I think the Korean producers who we work with said, oh, well, this might be a different thing. Their sound is more urban, it might be different. But no, later on, we see them have this tremendous popularity back in Korea. So we think that we've seen some instances of where certain K-pop groups get more popular outside the country, and then it lends itself to kind of proving their worth internally. Otherwise, it was more the industry that was determining what they were doing.
Yeah, I think the question of where things originate is a difficult one, but I think I will also take a crack at it. I think in regards to China, obviously Hallyu, the Korean wave, is a big factor of what they're looking at in terms of cinema and television. And I think what they're attracted to is certainly not only the elements of, things that they're responding to deeply, but also quality in the way it's written, in production value. And I think the way that people have perceived what is good quality, what is good storytelling, has changed very quickly in China. They've been exposed to a lot of Western movies, a lot of Korean content, and I think they're also looking for that quality in their own local language films. I would say that the proliferation of manga has really influenced the way that they are drawing comic strips and the way that they're consuming comic entertainment as well. So I think it's really, for China specifically, the fact that they've been deluged with all this fantastic content, truly creative, are tours or artists or storytellers, and they themselves want to see that not only within China, but whatever else comes into their gates.
I think it's similar in India in the sense of India is a mature, pretty mature television and film market. It's the largest, virtually the largest film producer in the world. So much of the content originates in the South Asian area. There have been some influences, and certainly it's more, India has looked more to the West. So Hollywood films are about 10% of the box office today, which is a growing segment. But for the rest of Asia, it's really been very marginal, the impact and the influence of the rest of Asia. Interestingly, some of the Bollywood dance moves are gaining popularity all the way in China. They're gaining popularity in Korea, and we like Gangnam Style dancing for a while. That got on for a while, but then died. But you know, hey, it was good for that brief moment in time. But you know, some of the South Indian films are very popular, and some of the actors are very popular in Japan, which I was just absolutely amazed about. And so there's been a spread out. I think the spread in is yet to come. I mean, certainly actors like Jackie Chan or Bruce Lee in the old days are well recognized, but they wouldn't attract the kind of attention Salman Khan or Shah Rukh Khan, which are our big actors, or an Amitabh Bachchan, which would cause everyone to sit up and want to gossip and talk the way you said, the 30%. It's 100% with these guys. With the others, it would be, you know, kind of interesting, but not so much.
When it comes to Japan, I think what originates from Japan culturally cross over to Asia or here, it's definitely manga. Out of all the entertainment media, music not, film not, TV drama not. We lose to other Asian countries in those area, but I think manga is still quite strong, and the Hollywood still pursues manga for live action version, and China actually, interesting enough, not only manga, they chase novels, Japanese suspense thrillers. It's hard to, you know, I think it takes longer to translate and publish the books, but somehow Chinese companies are so fast. I once worked on this case of Japanese popular bestseller that was translated into Asian languages. Chinese company licensed to make it into live action before Japan. That was a very interesting case.
And just to, you know, I forgot to add, we've been trying anime from Japan in India for a long time, and I guess I'm the only person who watches it in India, because 0 in terms of ratings, but you know, hey, we've tried that. We took a Korean movie and redid it in Hindi, and that seems to have worked fairly well, which was a movie called Couples, which is a small film, but it worked well in the Indian context. So there is some give and take on these things.
You know, given that we've talked about the ebb and flow of different genres, do any of you think that one type of genre of entertainment is perhaps more unifying through the region than others? In other words, would it be film that's more unifying, music that's more unifying, perhaps sports? Just your ideas on whether one seems to be a little bit more transcendent than the others.
Film is, in our experience, the most difficult. I mean, it's considered as art, but it doesn't usually have the general audience pull because it gets a little bit segmentized. Music, I think everybody, you know, you would think that music is the easiest thing to relate to, and it's got a beat and whatever. But I think the part that really touches people's, this kind of transcultural element, is the drama, because you're pulled into that world with that story, and you're kind of socialized to it. And so, you know, the music is obviously, you know, a very young demographic, whereas the dramas seem to have a larger scope. And, you know, in some ways that's similar to, you know, people growing up on Hollywood movies or U.S. TV shows. We think, you're living outside the United States, but you think you know what the U.S. is like. Oh, the relationships, and this is how dads are. So you feel like you get this glimpse into a world, and it helps you to find understanding. So in the case of Korean content, definitely the first that went out that really kind of created this playing field and interest was Korean drama. So historically, that's the case. But I think just functionally, the TV shows are easier to absorb.
I think for me, again, I think this is a little bit difficult to address, but it doesn't quite fall into any of those buckets. I feel like all those most regions in the APAC, most APAC region, most countries in the APAC region. Sorry, it's early. Are India's it can be a little bit insular, and Japan as well, and China is quite big. But I think there's an interesting case study with the company called Snow, which is a Naver. Naver is the Google of Korea. It is a tech company, which is also made a company called Line, which is a mobile messaging app. Snow is essentially the Korean version of Snapchat, and Snow is allowed in China, and is probably one of the fastest growing apps right now. So for people that aren't familiar with Snapchat, it's a mobile messaging system, but it allows you to put augmented reality filters over you. So you can select something that says a dog filter, and you get ears, and if you open your mouth, the tongue comes out. So that is a trend that's very interesting, that's happening all throughout the APAC region. But again, it's Line, Korean company, lots of penetration in Japan. Snow, again, I think China has a large firewall of specific apps that are not domestic Chinese of being blocked, but Snow is allowed right now. And you see a lot of people, a lot of youth that are using Snow to make interesting pictures and interesting videos, and they're sharing it on WeChat, which is the big mobile messaging app in China. So that may be very confusing for some of you, but it's essentially an ecosystem of a bunch of different technology capabilities being proliferated around. And that's
so rather than it being really a genre of entertainment like film, music, or sports, it's really sort of the community that's created by these apps that's really driving it.
That's correct. And I think a lot of these apps are encouraging self-expression as well.
I couldn't agree more. I think that, WhatsApp, Twitter, Facebook, India is one of the largest users of these apps, and it's connecting India into a global audience and into the global feeds that come off Twitter, so people can see what's trending. People are aware much more globally of things because of their Twitter feed, and the BuzzFeed hasn't gotten as much into India as yet, but Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp, these three really dominate, and then the local equivalents. And from that, I think you really are seeing a global audience develop. The other thing that I would say, at least in South Asia, probably sports is the common binder because it's a one sport area. It's only cricket. We don't play anything else, don't have any interest in anything else. So in that one sport, we can unify the whole of South Asia.
I also want to say sport which doesn't necessarily need the language and then apply the same rules to everybody. But when it comes to sport, at least in Japan, I can see people get very nationalistic. And watching at Olympic Games on Japanese TV, I don't get to know other teams. I want to know more human stories, maybe because I'm a film producer. There must be interesting stories, but all I see is the same scenes from Japanese teams over and over again. So that's kind of, disappointing as a unifying form. But I also see, maybe again, coming from Japan, the animation out of manga is really unifying maybe small kids because it usually don't have political themes, and you don't necessarily need difficult, lines either. And also talking about the Twitters or Line, young people use stickers to communicate, and those can be made out of animation characters. And I also use stickers, and my friends overseas like, what's this? And I start to explain, this is a character from this animation. That can be, interesting, unifying form, I think.
Can I just add one? I mean, I was always thinking first of all, I think we need to recognize manga and anime as kind of the original Asian culture that has, taken hold of, young people's imagination worldwide. I mean, it was the original. It's still very, very strong. I mean, K-pop has a lot of visibility, but the actual just absolute audience for anime and manga in the United States is larger. And then the consumption, I mean, it's been years and years. It's decades we're into this. It's no longer a trend. It's part of our lifestyle. But you take that, and then, we think of social media as something that was really defined and developed here in the United States. But in many ways, I think the ways that we communicate are led in some ways by Asia. So this whole use of stickers, I mean, we now all use emojis, but if I told any of you a couple of years ago that you'd be using emojis in your business communication, you'd be mortified. It's happening. I mean, Korea was one of those places where people stopped using email and then just started messaging. And I was like, that's so unprofessional. We're all doing that. They started using...
Which creates a whole host of other problems.
Thank you, Mr. Lawyer. So there are these things that we don't even think of as uniquely Asian, but you can trace a path. And we've said this in many ways. A lot of the conditions in Asia, the massive urbanization, very, very quick turnover of things. I mean, now online social communities are taking over that function, but Asia was able to have those very quick iterations, I think, earlier, and is out there in this way. So.
Do you think also that paparazzi or the development of paparazzi within the region has actually changed that? I heard an interesting report probably a few months ago about the real development of paparazzi in Korea. And so I'd be curious about the experience in all of these different territories, because obviously what the paparazzi or the entertainment news does in the US contributes to the speed, contributes to the robustness of that. Listening to the development of this phenomenon in Korea was interesting. Yuki, how is that, maybe go in the reverse direction, has that contributed in Japan as well?
Yeah, we have our own gossip that, as I said, comes on the regular news every day. And it, yes, that's the speed. And also interesting thing now in Japan is, I think, different from Korea and China, and I don't know about India. We are not so interested in Hollywood gossip. It may be same in other Asian countries. Our region comes first. The Japanese stars comes first, and we are still interested in Korean stars, and not so much Chinese stars we follow. But yeah, that once you have Twitter, all the tweet comes on same subject matter. And sometimes it's just too much, like, oh, I already know 200% of this gossip, So, but yeah, the interesting enough, I think, when it comes to paparazzi, it's quite regional. What paparazzi's news, I don't know if that travels so fast to China and Korea, unless it's a huge entertainment news.
Again, I would agree with you that it's local. I mean, the gossip is local. It's about the film stars that are local. And unfortunately, the Indian press has this habit of not necessarily checking facts and just publishing stuff. So it's a lot of fiction as well. So it's real gossip. And it's really quite interesting and quite exciting, because until you find out it isn't true.
And I would agree. I think for China it is also very regional. I think the terminology netizens, even though I feel like, especially out of Korea, there are examples of the netizens being very ruthless and being very severe on stars, I think there are a couple cases where in China the netizens have contributed to something really interesting and cross-border. There's a news publication outlet here called BuzzFeed, and they had a reporter who had lost his phone, and it turned up in China, and this gentleman in the States looked on his iCloud, because the phone was still linked, and saw that there are all these pictures of a gentleman in China taking pictures of orange trees and oranges. So he posted online and he said, this is where my phone is. I have no idea who this is. And people in China had picked it up, shared that story on WeChat, and tracked down who this particular gentleman in China was. And they had arranged a meeting. And it's a little bit of a long story, but it's actually becoming a film, a U.S. film right now. It's interesting. But again, I think that's sort of the power, the vastness of the community and the netizens globally.
I think the point about local is something that we're going to just see in entertainment overall. I mean, Hollywood content has been the premier destination for a long time because local content never had the budgets and didn't have the wherewithal to stand up to it. There's obviously a lot of Chinese film investment money here in the United States investing into U.S. film to create these global product, because U.S. film is still the global product that can go. But I mean, just even in our company, we've done a different thing where if you recognize that every country, if you give them great local product, that's what people are really going to want to see if they have that option. We had a very sweet story about a grandmother who suddenly supernaturally gets transformed into her 20-year-old self with her family, and then so she's really excited. She's going to relive her 20s. It did very well in Korea, and then we remade it. We remade it in China, and it was #1 for about 2 weeks. We remade it in Vietnam, and when it was released, it beat Star Wars. We remade it. There's a Japanese remake that came out. There's a Turkish remake. So in our way, it's like, okay, people want local stories, or people want stories told in their local language with their stars that they know and they love, but maybe global stories travel everywhere. It's not just the Hollywood star that can travel everywhere.
Makes sense. The universal theme depicted in the product, but with the local language and the local stars. So we've been talking about this phenomenon that the culture unifies, but there's still a lot of opportunity, for better or for worse, in a lot of these countries still for government intervention. Probably the most recent example is the situation where China has threatened reprisal against Korean content. The arguable reason was something that was political over missile systems, but it led to a threatened ban on certain Korean content in China. So I'm curious about your views about government intervention in general and whether it comes from any particular country, and maybe this particular incident and where you think it'll lead.
So that is the multi-million-dollar question these days. And even we're directly affected by it because we're doing business planning for next year, and suddenly, wait, all those revenues that you thought were going to come from China have vanished. We've seen in the stock market pricing for various entertainment companies, they're way off because of the China impact. So there's that. But I think culture, it's always been thought of as a form of soft power. And so it's a way to export your power. It's a way, when there's too much of it coming into your country, whether it's Hollywood content or Korean content or whatever have you, it's considered threatening. I think it's just the reality. They kind of do go hand in hand. If you really go back, people sometimes say that the whole impetus for the globalization of Korean content or Hallyu was a quote that the former President Kim Jong-sam kept saying again and again to describe the country. He said, one single movie, he was talking about Jurassic Park, made the same revenue as the equivalent of 1.5 million Hyundai automobiles. For your reference, at that time, it would have taken 2 years worth of Korean car exports to get to 1.5 million. So his point was we've created this great economy, we think we're all that, but we really need to move on to the next. And then, also implicit in that understanding is it's not just the money. You create a greater brand for Korea through cultural product, and then you can raise all of the other markets as well. That's kind of what my job is. So they're very tied together. I think it'll always, you were talking about sports and nationalism, culture, I think brings that out as well. So it's interesting. It's unifying because the millennial generation is so much more multicultural and doesn't care where things come from. But it also is inflaming of people's protectionary instincts.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. I think on this side of the world, I think we're also looking at what the effects of THAAD will be between U.S. and Korea. We've seen some Korean talent be censored. Their faces are blurred out on Chinese television. But then you also see the sale of, certain Korean formats that are still happening in China, licensing opportunities, so it's Korean content to be shown in China. So I think there sort of is a stance, but I think it is a little bit gray in some areas, especially in regards to co-productions and licensing. All that to say, I think we'll find out in the next couple of months of just how severe it will be. Again, I think there's been a lot of investment that's been put into China and Korea on both sides. So I don't think it will be, I hopefully don't think it will be as severe as some people are projecting it to be. At the end of the day, Korean dramas, movies, storytelling have really influenced people, have really a lot of common threads with people in China. I think the President Xi Jinping's wife even said that the My Love from the Stars male lead actually reminded her of Xi Jinping when he was younger.
Of course,
So-
of course.
Right, but then even shows like Descendants of the Sun, which is a Korean drama from KBS, talks a lot about nationalism, and a lot of people in China have resonated with that idea too, of nationalism, of helping others, and of being a citizen of a country. So.
I think unfortunately in Asia, politics and entertainment sometimes really do get intertwined, and we were very optimistic with iTunes launch in China, and then it gets shut down over basically a political issue, having the wrong film up in Hong Kong, or so I believe, but whatever. We see that in India, the right-wing Hindu parties don't want you to bring in talent from Pakistan, and that prevents a real cross-fertilization of culture. So there are issues that come when politics mix up with entertainment that can be quite significant and really sometimes don't resolve as nicely as we would like.
Similar to what Manji just said, for Japan, not necessarily government regulation, but business is being afraid of harassed by right-wing groups. So Japan being a bad guy, if that scene was in Korean film or Chinese film, if a distributor wanted to distribute the film, they can be afraid of someone coming harassing the business at the movie theater. And that's more of self-censorship, so-called. And then unfortunately, I think the economy really affects the situation, because when the economy is good, so many people can be brave enough to say, I don't care to lose this distribution business because I can do this and that. But now everybody is kind of trying to hold on to what they can protect. And it's less risk-taking in the business. That also affects to be more conservative to the business. That's, the situation in Japan.
Yeah, definitely. You have the political environment, the economic environment intertwined with the culture, for sure. And rather than, since I understand we have a little bit of limited time left, rather than end on a somewhat subdued note because of that notion, maybe just a little bit of futurism from each of you in terms of what trend you may see coming out of your particular country that you think will spread in terms of outward. And it can be in any particular arena, whether it's webtoons from Korea or whatever it might be, just something in your head that you think might spread out. And maybe, again, Yuki, you could start with something.
I see again, about animation. For the past few years, there was no Japanese film being distributed in China. This year, there are 5. Out of 5, there are 3 animations. So I think using those, so-called entertainment content, hopefully the politically sensitive countries and Japan can form more, young people can form more, relationship. I think it will be good for the business, and also, I don't want to be too, idealistic, but to, world affair too.
So I was going to say that I certainly believe that local content is rising, the quality is getting better, and it's growing in importance. But that said, I wouldn't want to underemphasize the importance of Hollywood, because Hollywood content is truly aspirational. But what has to happen with Hollywood content, it has to globalize. So we at Sony now think of the box office outside in being the US, but outside is where the growth is occurring, whether it be in Russia, whether it be in China, whether it be in India. The box offices are growing outside the US and are stagnant in the US. So what we're looking at is how do we create an international experience, which means shooting in more international locations. It means having a cast that is more global and not so North American. It means making movies that appeal to sentiments across the globe. And so I believe that Hollywood will continue to have its growth outside the US, and in fact, the two, local content and global content, will coexist.
I agree wholly with Manjeet, and in fact, my colleague David Tagiaf, who's in the corner over there, and I have worked heavily on local language slates, where we partner a notable Western talent with the veritable leaders in a specific region, whether it's India or Korea, or hopefully other regions. I think when you look at the box office for film, you see increasingly people want to see local language films. They want to see their voices, their narratives, their regions on that silver screen. I think something else to a trend that we're seeing also is the rise of female content creators, producers, directors, writers, and business leaders. And I think in the next 5 to 10 years, we'll see the way that influences content as well.
It's always hard to prognosticate, but you mentioned Webtoon, and I think that's really interesting. Actually, people who are already watching Korean dramas may not even realize that so much of dramas these days, their source material is actually coming from Webtoon, and then there's a whole new category of content. It's similar to anime, but it's different, so we'll see where it goes. I know that Naver and another company have both launched Webtoon platforms here in the United States. I just think that it may not be a particular genre of content, but this idea of this social media, community-driven, we've gotten rid of the experts. Like, we're no longer told by experts what to watch and what to listen to. We're told by our friends. That is incredibly strong, and I don't think that that's going away anytime soon. And I love to point out that, on YouTube is also an incredibly, not just for K-pop. YouTube is now the primary music discovery vehicle that people have. So you think it's visual, but it's actually, it's just a mishmash together. And on YouTube, Beyonce and BTS stand side by side as the same size thumbnail. So there really is a burgeoning of opportunity, I think, for these cross-cultural things. And as the stars themselves, you were saying, like people want local content, but then Manjeet, you were talking about outside in. Everybody's more conscientious about a global audience. So products themselves, even if they're in a particular language or for that country, are becoming more global minded and being produced outside of the countries. And I think that's just good for everyone.
And I think just to take up on your point, short form content, not necessarily just the YouTube kind or Maker kind or Periscope, but I think that you're going to see short form content with the millennials who have only 5 minutes to watch something and then they're got to get on to the next thing or their text messages or whatever. I think you're going to see all of us also producing short form content to complement the long form content.
I think we may have time for one question based on the messages I'm getting. So, Tiffany, if you could.
Thank you very much. This is illuminating and fun. My name is Kathy Moon. Came in from Boston. I'm at Wellesley College and the Brookings Institution. I do political science, the politics side, but I love learning from what you all do to understand politics better. One thing I'm not hearing at all is entertainment and the future for the elderly population, which would include me pretty soon. Given that Asia's population, the countries that you're talking about in particular, are going to be hitting, minus India, let's say, are going to be hitting they're already in major demographic crises. Japan and Korea, as we know, Taiwan, and then China is following very fast. They are the ones who are going to be voting. They're the ones who are still going to be holding power in the ballot box, and yet the cultural power will be held by the young people. Most of what you're talking about, a generation, from 40, 45 on, is not clued in, and they will be left behind. So I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on what do people do for older people?
The older generation, when it comes to Japan, women have power in spending money in entertainment. Older Japanese women love Korean drama. My mother is a huge fan of a Korean actor. She doesn't care about Japanese actors. So that there is specific, taste for older generation, and as you said, they still have the power economically, and that I think is quite regional. We produce many films targeting older audience. The theme doesn't necessarily appeal younger audience, and in a way, it's quite separate. So yes, you're right. We talked about younger generation today, but there is different, media. There's different way of entertainment for 40 and over, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, our TriStar label is directed at an older audience with adult content, and that's where they focus their attention. So the labels will develop which will deal with the aging population with content more suited to them. You'll still have your mass youth-oriented programming from a Columbia or other labels like that.
CCTV is the national television system in China, and by and far, period dramas, Chinese period dramas, are the most watched in that demographic as well. I would also say that decision makers at SART and CFG are 40 and up, and so there's that great creative tension that's needed between what will appeal to their demographic and also the younger filmmakers that are working with them.
Actually, on this, my comment is only anecdotal. My mom never watched Korean dramas. My mom's Korean. Never watched Korean dramas. And then when she retired, she realized that she couldn't talk to her friends unless she was watching the dramas. And then she found herself really loving the dramas. This is a woman who worked in PR her entire life, very professional. And I was like, wow, that's what happens. And then the other part is, but I think it harks back to this idea of community or the water cooler. Like, there is something when everybody's talking about it, whether it was made for young people or old people, everybody wants to be part of that conversation. And then I've had two different Korean friends tell me that they had to upgrade their parents to a smartphone from a very, so I'm like in my 40s, so we're talking people in their 70s, like have to get a smartphone, and the kids are like, oh no, like that's too hard to try to teach your parents. Like, why do you need a smartphone? Because all my friends are on Kakao. Like, I need to text and chat with them and send them the stickers and notify. So again, I think it's not specifically, I don't know if there's something separate for seniors. It's that where the community is going, everybody will figure it out, I believe.
Kevin Hanley with Merrill Lynch. I'm interested in asking the panel about investment opportunities in Asia. You mentioned Google, Facebook, Twitter, Line, Disney comes to mind. Are there any particular companies that you're particularly enthusiastic about?
Mine?
I think each of them would probably be a little bit self-interested in that. Obviously, Sony, even CAA as an agency, is expanding its interest in the region. I think you can look at CJ as really, at this point, a worldwide conglomerate which has interest both here in the U.S., in China. I think you're one of the bigger theater owners in China in terms of foreign ownership. So in a way, speaking for the group, because I think they would be embarrassed promoting each of their own companies, I think that you're right in the sense that big brands, are always important within the region. And what really happens in a cultural sense, in the IP sense, is how are they able, and now I'm speaking from the legal side, how are they able to protect those brands in the region? So whether you're a Nike or whether you're any other kind of brand, whether you're a music brand, a film brand like Universal, what are the opportunities for you to expand those brands in the region, and what are the opportunities for you to basically be able to protect them at the same time? Because if you can't protect them, if everybody can rip off the Nike swoosh, if everybody can basically, exploit Jurassic World, you have a problem in protecting those brands, and that's going to affect, obviously, the valuation of those companies in that region. And that actually is a discussion for a whole other panel, which is when you want to expand in the region, can you come in as the big, arrogant, whether you're American or any other company, and say, we want to do it our way? Or are you going to be able to do something that's more organic? And are you going to be able to do something that perhaps uses local culture to build that brand in the area?
So I'm not pitching CJ, but I mean, what we've seen is we have a lot of internal conversations about institutional investors versus strategic investors. In the case of the United States, you look at investment opportunities, a lot of things have been very much bid up by institutional. Whereas when we see in Korea, our company included, but you will look around the landscape at mobile game companies, all of them. If you dig, the second largest owner of a lot of Korean companies right now is actually Chinese money, which is like Tencent, Alibaba, which is strategic investment going into Korea. And I'm sure it's not just Korea as well. So interesting times, because there's this obviously the sense that there's a new source of potentially global product that's, and US product and brands are very, very expensive, and there might be other opportunities as well.
There's a different digital media ecosystem in China. A lot of the traditional outlets are blocked there. So there is, as we see, there's a little bit of an MCN boom or multi-channel network boom in Korea. There's something of the same sort in China, but there does need to be strategic partners in Korea as well as the US. So there's an interesting space of technology companies in data mining companies that are looking for institutional or strategic investment from the States as well as other regions in the APAC region to sort of unify US and APAC in the digital media front.
And in India, I would say that there's a real consolidation opportunity in the cable business and the DTH business. And there's huge growth. India is only 63% penetrated in terms of television households. So, there's growth for 20 years to come. And that's a market, it's a bit of a Wild West market, but if you've got the stomach for it, come on in.
I think it's been known for a while, but for Japan, I think game and animation, look at Pokemon Go, that's the perfect combination. That's still so much talent. I think talent is the main thing that, talent comes to the business, then that's where, you see the future.
I think I'm getting the signal that we've used up our time, so I want to thank our panelists, Yuki, Manjit, Christina, Angela, thank you so much.